Hello and welcome to the Xenogenesis podcast. This is episode 42, in which we're covering chapter 23 of part 2 Phoenix of book 2 Adulthood Rites of the Xenogenesis trilogy by Octavia Butler. I'm joined as always by my co-host
Michael Glinka. Hi everyone.
What's the meaning of life, Michael?
Oh yeah, 42 we're on episode 42, and just as I said to Rich a second ago, I read somewhere that Douglas Adams, is that correct again, Richard? The name of the author what's the name of the book now?
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Basically, the reason why he put number 42 is because in the ASCII table, 42 stands for tilde, so it can be anything. So there we go. That's a nice little fact, apparently. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just spreading the internet information out. But hey,
yeah, I didn't know this one. That's good. I always use 42 for the seeds for my random number generators, which is probably not a good idea.
That's probably really not a good idea. Also, if you oh well.
We'll see how that works out.
We'll see in the future. It will bite you back.
Yeah.
At least we'll know the reason.
Okay then. So we're going to open again with a little bit of content corner and follow up on a couple of things that came up last time. So I think last time we talked briefly about the fact that I'd watched an anime called The Saga of Tanya the Evil, which I feel like I underplayed how much I enjoyed that last time. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that I think that's great. It plays exactly into my sense of humor. I watched the little short OVA, Operation Desert Pasta, and the movie since, and I really love that anime. I suspect that will remain near the top of my list for an extended period of time.
Speaking of anime, actually, I think there's another one that I want to introduce you to, because I think, and everyone who's listening, because I think it's really interesting concept. It's called 86.
Okay.
There's a second season ongoing now, and I've literally binge watched the first season and the second season up to where it was available at the time, and I need to say it's really good. I don't want to go too much into details because I would spoil. The anime is there's a lot of plot hooks, but basically it's a world where an AI, there's a war between two countries, and then one of them developed weapons, basically mobile weapons that were run by AI, which goes rogue and basically starts to kill everything on sight. And basically it's about survival of remnants of humanity against those autonomous army, this autonomous AI army. But the reason why I'm mentioning
is it a bit like Terminator without the time travel?
Yes, basically. But the reason why I'm mentioning is that it's because there's a lot of political and social commentary to our common our world, and I think. And then generally, I really enjoyed it, and I think you would enjoy it as well, Richard, because there's a lot of things. Because there are also things about racism and disregard of human life, and just in general attitude of like a lot of countries and people in general. There's a lot of commentary in a way indirectly, and if you listen to it, think about it more, you can really find a lot of connections to our world. So I would highly recommend it. It's really good. Okay,
that's going on my list.
I think that the books that the anime is based on actually won several awards in Japan, so I think it's really good.
I'll give that a look.
I think it's one of my recent ones, one of my top animes, simply because of the message behind it. I find it really interesting. It's in general like very sort of bittersweet, but also like sometimes can go really dark, but like in the facade of being like light-hearted can be very dark. So
that's one of the things I liked about Tanya, in that it's it has darkness, but it's very humorous, right? It's very dark humor. I like that. Okay then. So the other thing I wanted to follow up on from our previous little discussion session was Apple's adaptation of the Foundation series. Kind of lost me. Like I was somewhat optimistic. They were doing some interesting things, but they did a couple of things in some of the. I think it was around about episode 6 where they introduced something which seems to demonstrate they really fundamentally have not understood what psychohistory is supposed to be in the original books. They've just not like. And it's one of those things where they don't seem to have really understood the source material, so they can't adapt it well. Or if they understood it, they somehow disagree with it. And it's
basically maybe dumb it down for the more mainstream population.
I mean, to keep it vague and non-spoilery, I will say it's a very postmodern adaptation of a modernist source material, which really doesn't work because there's an epistemic clash that it's
Okay, I see.
Which I find frustrating.
In a way, you also sort of explain why they probably tried to apply it more to modern like viewers, which sometimes the source material which was written different times.
I mean, like it's not. I don't have a problem with updating and modernizing, but the core themes are quite tied up with epistemology, right? They're quite tied up with how we can know things about the future and so on. So bringing a postmodern epistemic frame to a modernist work that has that central to some of its core exploratory themes really does not work as a adaptation of that source material, right? If you want to make that style of commentary, you need to adapt something else because that does it's not. It doesn't. This is one of the things that was kind of successful about like Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Dune, which I saw between the last time we spoke.
Oh, did you? I still haven't.
It clearly understood the underlying themes of the work and kept the core message intact in the way that it did the adaptation. Like it had a lot of visual pizzazz, right? It was extraordinarily like beautiful film in the way that Denis stuff usually is. But like Apple's attempt to do Foundation has the big budget pretty stuff but has missed thematically what was going on underneath it would appear.
Like it's similar, like I would say, to a lot of games nowadays. They can look very pretty, but behind there's nothing there, no content or like hook to keep you up. Like the storyline. So it's often, I mean, modern like stuff like this. It's a shame, isn't it? Though, like there's a lot of things that if they really stick to the core material, you could really get good stuff out of it. But and yet people do it. On the other hand, if I could chip in something, I've been reading a really interesting book. Well, I think it's more of I was reading recently. Kurzgesagt curator Philip Detmer released a book on our immune system. And the title is "Immune: A Journey into the Mysterious System That Keeps You Alive." And as you probably, for all our listeners who you know that I'm a massive fan of the channel. Like there's no hiding it. And so I immediately, when there was a pre-order, I immediately jumped on the bandwagon and pre-ordered the book. And it arrived, and I need to say, it's brilliant. It's really well written to understand what the immune system is, but it's written in a way. I don't want to spoil some of the fragments, because when I read about the neutrophil specifically, I'm thinking about the moment. His description is the most colorful, gory, but funny description of a cell in comparison, like how to visualize it. And I need to say, I was laughing my ass off on the book about the immune system, which is a very difficult concept. And I would say that I highly, highly recommend buying that book and reading it, because it's one, if you're interested in biology and want to learn more about it, at least in sort of like overall idea. Like it doesn't go into too much detail, but like obviously we're not expecting it to, but it goes into enough to actually understand what's happening in your body, and it's done brilliantly, and it's really funny. And in general, I literally just like spaghetti normally, I'm sucking it up. I mean, it's a really good book. So
okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Even like Richard, even like may know a lot, but like it's a book that I highly recommend for all people, whether you're a specialist or somebody who has no idea about biology, because it's really well written.
Immunology is not my strong suit, so that's that might be worth a read.
To be fair, I picked it up because part of my research also requires a bit of knowledge in immunology, and it's a good start in a way. I mean, I already know a bit more than this, but on some cells that I don't have any knowledge about, it's a really good beginning where to look into, to look into them. So, in general, it's for everyone.
And having a compelling kind of frame, sort of a compelling narrative frame, or one of those models that has it somehow sticks in your brain better, right? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
One of those things as a framework to build further knowledge around.
I'm telling you,
I think often helpful.
For the rest of my life, I will know what the neutrophil is and what it does, because the way he described it is just chef's kiss. But also, just to add
spoilers for non-fiction books now.
Like, honestly, but like, I know, but it's also, the book has drawings done by the team that does art for Kurzgesagt videos. So it has beautiful designs and visualizations of what things are. So it's really, really a worth buy, and it's not that expensive. So I would highly recommend for anyone who's interested in that type of stuff. And even if you're not, go buy it, because it's honestly worth it.
Okay, nice. So I had one last thing to contribute to Content Corner, which was the another book that I read, which was The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks from the Culture series, which I wanted particularly to mention it because there's a sister podcast, shall we say, to our own, that another one that's sort of spawned from the same intellectual roots that was inspired by the same people I was inspired by when I first suggested this, which is called Uncultured Swine. Which is a companion to the reading Ian M. Banks's Culture series, which I've been meaning to do for a while, and so the podcast helped me get a start in that direction. And oddly enough, this book also features an alien species which has 3 sexes.
Oh, nice.
I won't go into the details of how that works, but it's somewhat different to the way it works in this universe. It was written slightly after the first book in this series, so I don't know whether or not Banks was inspired by Butler at all, but I couldn't, with some quick Googling, ascertain if there was any documentation of that, but apparently it's a thing.
Okay.
And then the other kind of odd, interesting bit about that is in the Culture, humans can transition their genders at will, or their biological sexes even, at will. Takes them a couple of weeks or so, but they can just swap. And the convention to maintain population levels is to bear one child and father one child, or some such.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. But how far in the future are we talking about?
Oh, long way. Like, I don't know if there's a specific time frame, but like,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Awesome. And it's, of course, you read another book that we could potentially introduce here, but of course you read it, and now I have to even harder job to look for books for us. God damn it.
I mean, there's the rest of the Culture series, which I haven't read yet.
By the time we record the next episode, ladies and gentlemen, he will finish all of the series, be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to read them all.
Maybe.
See, he's not even saying no, because obviously it's gonna happen. God damn you, Richard. I'm telling you, like, last time I joked that I'll have to look for some foreign writers that I haven't translated the books translated yet to find anything that he hasn't read yet. So, yeah, that's my job probably now for the next, I don't know, year, to find the book finally that he hasn't read. The moment I mention it, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I read the whole lexicon of them. Anyway.
So, did you have anything else for Content Corner? Or
no, that's me. I just wanted to mention that anime for in the book. I just wanted to nice. Little sponsorship from Kurzgesagt, maybe one day.
By the way, let us know in the comments of anything that you subscribe to us on, whether or not you think this is a good or bad idea. You can email us, xenogenesis@gmail.com. But also, like, subscribe, rate us on various platforms in which you can rate us.
Yes,
that,
please
helps get us more attention.
Yeah.
So, shall we talk about your predictions for chapter 23?
So I was like, okay, this is the last chapter. I mean, the Oankali must have arrived by now, right? Like, please? I mean, come on. Couldn't be.
I mean, it did seem like a fairly reasonable climactic event to have at the end of this arc, right?
I mean, it would be really surprising if the Oankali haven't arrived by now. I mean, I would feel sorry for Akin. At this point, actually. Because my God, like the boy is being already more than a year away from his family. So, but yeah, it seems I was alright. I mean, it wasn't a great prediction. I was just like, because last time I was like, oh, Oankali arrived. No, not yet. No. But yeah.
But yeah, they showed up for the finale.
Yes.
Good timing.
Good timing. This is, a wizard is never late or never early or too late. He's always on time. So there we go. Oankali now have read Tolkien. Okay. Anyway, enough of jokes. Should we start with the summary?
Yes, let's get into it.
So the story picks up 10 days after Akin and Gabe's return from the journey, when the Oankali finally have arrived. The salvage site was packed with people since the new salvage team has arrived, but there was no outcry or shouting from the humans, meaning that the Oankali were staying away from them. At the time, Akin was working on a crystal vase, cleaning it up when he smelled them. He picked up their scent. Thinking fast, he decided to speak to Tate and tell her that they are here for him and she's the only one that can take him to Oankali without any bloodshed. Tate, though initially not wanting to do it because there was a high chance for either of them getting killed, eventually picked up Akin and started walking the direction Akin told her to. She was terrified. Akin, knew she wasn't afraid of death, but what was she terrified though of? That was his question.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one because she kind of says that they might get killed, but it doesn't seem like that's what she's actually afraid of, right? It's I think we get some kind of more hints at it later on in this chapter, but I think it's she's more afraid of kind of like falling back in with the Oankali, right? It's
I think that's what goes through her mind, because I think at the time it was Gabe, wasn't it, in the book one that felt, let's say, disgusted by himself with the connection with the Oankali, whereas Tate, I think that what's the word? She felt really compelled. No, there's a nice word they used in this chapter that Akin uses, that this is almost as if insensitized. No. Doesn't matter. I'm sorry. Apologies. Sure. It's just basically like it really makes them like want to be with the Ooloi, but
yeah, it seems like she's afraid of the kind of the sway that they can have over humans, right? She's afraid of being subject again to the kind of the compulsion that she and Gabe kind of fell victim to, if you will. They were seduced by the Ooloi, and they didn't like it because it was, they did it, but they didn't intellectually feel like they wanted to do it. If you see what I mean, right? Yeah. So the afraid again of that compulsion or being enthralled by the Oankali.
Absolutely. But yeah, once they arrived at the site where Oankali were, there were a number of them, as well as Lilith and Tino. And when Tate spotted Oankali, she froze, but didn't run. Lilith, on the other hand, like a Super Saiyan, the moment she saw Akin, immediately teleported near them before any of them could react. Literally, that was the description of Akin, that like before he couldn't even react, Lilith was basically beside them and already catching him in her arms. And here's a little excerpt from the book. "I've been waiting for you so long," he whispered finally. "I've been looking for you for so long," she said, her voice hardly sounding like her voice at all. She kissed his face and stroked his hair, and finally held him away from her. 3 years old, she said. "So big. I kept worrying that you wouldn't remember me. But I knew you would. I Of course, I honestly, like, I love Lilith. Like, I feel like she needs to be more in the spotlight, because the moment, like, just like she teleports in, you know, I'm telling you, she's more of a Super Saiyan now than, like, she's not human anymore.
Now, I mean, we only get a little bit of her here, but she's great.
Yeah, I think it's like the most compelling protagonist that I have encountered in a while. So
yeah, it's kind of I always when I started this book, I was like, we're getting a lot less of Lilith here, and I really like Lilith.
Yeah, that's
like
the
Lilith.
thing. She's one of those characters that really makes you understand her, because she's really written like a human being, right? It's not you know, it's not like, you know, you just accept your role, or you don't accept and you resist, and then you eventually, like a hero story, you win. She's more of like, she's really more of a human being that you can feel for and understand when you actually think about what's driving her.
Yeah, and the kind of the great thing about her character is she has kind of all of the like the heroic traits,
Yes.
as it were, right? She has the resolve and the strength of will and all the rest of it, but she's in such a like bind of a situation that despite that she still
Can't do anything about it. Yeah.
There's only so much she can do to get around it, which I think is a refreshing kind of like a refreshing position to put your like admirable qualities possessing protagonist in, right? You don't just have them win victory, you have them like, you know, carve out the best island of
whatever like, you can do, you just do your best out of whatever you can, and you know, hope that it lasts, basically. So I wish really we had more of Lilith, but I feel like, you know, it's gonna be less and less of her in future, because I mean, Akin is the spotlight of this book, so but we'll see.
Yeah, we get little sprinklings of you know, reminder.
Yes. But yeah, Akin laughed at the impossible idea of him forgetting her and wondered if she cried, if she was crying, you know, if she was saying. But the only thing Lilith was doing was just checking his body if there's nothing missing. I just love like Lilith is just, you know, like hiding her emotions, but at the same time, you know, like, because I would be bawling my eyes. Like, but anyway, that's me. In the meantime, Tino and Tate had a conversation. You know, Tino had memory problems after the damage he sustained from the men, from that injury he got from those men when they raided the village, but his memory was slowly coming back to him. Lilith explained what happened to Tino to Tate, and then asked her if it was worth that Tino almost died for Tate having Lilith's son. But Akin immediately stepped in, saying she was his only friend who took care of him, and that the men initially tried to sell him in the other villages. The conversation finishes there with Lilith saying that, you know, they got too careless because they didn't have any raid in years.
Yeah, which is why Tina got hurt, right?
Yeah,
was
in the first place.
She was almost kind of like apologizing to Tate for the fact that Tino got hurt after Tate had kind of directed him to go to Low.
Yep.
Because she thought he'd be safe there.
Yep. Akin was then passed to Dichaan, who shared how he found Tino and the fact that his family didn't search for him, while the others did initially but then stopped. Dichaan then confirmed that what Akin suspected, that the Oankali wanted him to learn about the humans, but his family for the first time in Oankali culture were against the general consensus. The Oankali would not help his family search for him until Akin learned enough. Crazy.
I'm not sure it was like the first time that a subgroup was like going against the consensus in the entire culture, but I think it certainly gives the impression that it was like rare. It was the first time that they'd been against the consensus, like, and the first time, and like a surprising thing that they would be.
Well, I think it's more of like the fact that they persisted with being against the consensus. I think that's more like an explanation here. And the fact that they continue to be against it, so which is, you know, a first step always. I think it's, you know, the Oankali are changing slowly more to be like human-like.
Because they're now internally divided and fractious.
Yes, basically. Well done.
Oh dear.
Oh well. I don't think that the mixing with humans it was a good choice, Oankali. It wasn't really not a good choice. Should just left us be and just, contain us for the rest of the existence of humanity as species.
Yeah, good thing they kept that Akjai segment.
Yeah.
Right off the human branch.
Exactly. The moment, in the future, it's gonna be like fire futures. Like, yes, see, the problem started 3,000 years ago or 3 million years ago when this goddamn Oankali mixed with the goddamn humans. See, our branch is pure. We have no problems like that. Them, they're just killing each other.
Well, I suppose we might see how much of that comes to pass.
Yeah. But yeah, unfortunately, the topic of his sibling came up as well. And for Akin, his siblings knows about him, but he will never experience what Amma and Shkacht had. Dichaan couldn't really make Akin feel better in any way, so he passed him to Nikanj. Lol. From one parent to another because he can't deal with it, so he's going to just point to the better parent. Nice one, Dichaan. Well done. Nikanj,
if it works.
if it works, yeah. Nikanj tried to distract him by asking him all about the things he've learned, the plant and animal life. And the chapter sort of goes into description of how important this exchange of information between like male and female Oankali and the Ooloi is. It sort of goes into more of a detail about that exchange of information and the pleasure given by the Ooloi is one thing, but it's how deep that exchange is and how deeply important it is and how necessary for them is and how good it feels for them. And, it takes time for Akin to sort of like, he realizes how important being an Ooloi is, and he sort of feeds into this, like, sharing that information with Nikanj because it sort of brings him an idea of like what the future will be when he has his own mates. Like how important is that exchange, sort of resembling exchange that what Amma and Shkacht had.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have this kind of he talks a little initially about this kind of the instrumental value of like we gather some biological information and give it to the Ooloi, and in exchange we get pleasure. But then it's like it's not just that. They have a sense of compulsion to gather that they want to do that anyway. Yes, right. It's a part of the way that they
and it's fascinating for them what the Ooloi does with it, like the understanding that Ooloi has of all the genetical information. And I think that's also why it's so compelling for them to do that.
But I think it gets into the whole question of kind of whether or not is that intention or is that a sense of gathering stuff being a terminal value that's not like instrumental for getting the pleasure? Is that something that the Ooloi have instilled in the males and females through their genetic engineering program? Right? Is it actually something they want to do because it has some value to them? I mean, it probably does indirectly because they're competing with, or breeding with, rather, cooperating with the Ooloi to reproduce.
Yep.
But it's another one of those things that makes me feel like somehow the Ooloi might have some kind of originally parasitic or perhaps not parasitic initially, but more mutualistic now relationship. Yeah.
We talked about this, that potentially I feel like an Ooloi wasn't originally there. Like it was something later on, maybe on the original planet that the Oankali come from, where basically there was another species that was capable of sort of like making this symbiotic or initially maybe parasitic behavior, but then through evolution it became more symbiotic, like in a lot of examples in nature on our world. And basically but in this case it's more like they learned this possibility to sort of control and control the genome of the species, and they made them more dependent on themselves. I feel like that's the case. Like it just has the sign of that's what's happened.
It certainly is what it kind of smells like from various little hints here and there in the way their biology works.
Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me of another species in science fiction that has kind of it's not quite a three-parent situation. It's more like they have a parasitic relationship with a third sex, as it were, but technically it's another species. So it's the puppeteers from Larry Niven's Ringworld books.
Okay.
They have a male and female, but they gestate in a third species. So they like the female deposits an egg with like an ovipositor, I can't remember what they call the thing that you do that with eggs, and then there's the males fertilize it, but in this other entity,
right?
And then I think they call them companions, and as the puppeteer like grows to maturity inside the companion, it kills the companion, right? So it's like one of those parasitic wasp things,
right?
Where it like lays an egg in something and they burst out and kill the host. But the puppeteers have this weird thing where they think of themselves as male and the companions as female, and kind of have them in the it's like a part of the household, despite the fact that they die after they reproduce.
It's basically a reverse praying mantis, basically, like whereas the female in praying mantis, the female eats the male while it's fertilizing her. Here it's a bit opposite.
Like, kind of, yeah, but also like there's a whole other species involved, and so on. So it's
interesting.
Yeah, but no.
See, this is ladies and gentlemen, this is another series that we could potentially talk, but Richard already read it.
Yeah. It's Ringworld. It's a classic.
It's a classic. I know, and like I'll never be able to catch up with you and your audiobooks. But okay. Anyway, stop. I'll stop complaining. I'm sorry. But yes, so once Akin became aware of the surroundings again after the exchange with Nikanj, he noticed that the three humans were sitting together, and on the far end of the hill, Gabe was standing and watching Tate. Akin wanted to get him, but Nikanj told him not to because, one, he's a resistant and he'll fight if Tate will be taken. And also, if he picks up Akin and runs to the village, then the Oankali would have to fight with humans who have guns, and Akin couldn't refute that because he knew that Gabe was capable of that. And the chapter ends with Lilith trying to coax Tate to join them, because if they wanted to have kids, it's better to be with Oankali instead of stealing them. Tate, on the other hand, knows what it means, and she won't do it because she knows that Gabe will not want to do that.
No, it's interesting. Lilith only has like a couple of lines in this section, but when she drops back in and says, like, I used to think you resistors would find an answer, right?
She really hoped it.
Jesus, your only answer has been to steal kids from us, the same kids you're too good to have yourselves. What's the point? Like, that last bit is just what we've been saying the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why you can't not love Lilith. It's just because she's just on point all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Tate is like, Gabe doesn't want that. So, and Lilith tells her like, well, actually, Gabe is here, but if ask her if she wants to call him, but if she should go away, should go ahead. Akin though calls to her and tells her that he will do what he's supposed to do, and the chapter ends with Tate kissing him on his forehead, and then Nikanj telling her that his parents are on the ship waiting for them. They haven't connected the other humans before she separates for them and joins Gabe, and that's where the chapter ends and the part 2 finishes.
Yep. I think that last bit there is kind of the callback to what we talked about right at the beginning of the chapter with Tate's fear, right? It's that she fears Kaguyat.
I'm not surprised.
His mates.
Oof. Honestly.
Drawing her back in.
If I had to deal with that guy, I would not want to be like...
Yeah, it's kind of it's like combining the like weird compulsion with the fact that Kaguyat's kind of an ass is
I would drop that kinda. I would say he's a full-on 100% unbearable ass. I'm not surprised Nikanj is staying on the earth, because I wouldn't be able to deal with a parent like that myself. But yeah, anyway, I just thought maybe, Richard, I could do a short summary of the part 2, just for everyone to sort of...
Yes, so I think there's a couple of things I just want to touch on, going back to the stuff in this chapter before we go on to the kind of broader arc summary for this section.
Please do.
So a little bit about Tino's kind of memory loss situation.
Go on.
It seemed like he was having slightly better recall of stuff that had happened post his travel to Low. And I think once he was at Lo, he got some interactions with the Oankali, and may have got some of the buffs that Lilith got when she was first interacting with the Oankali as well, right? So his memory, I think, is clearer there, because he's barely remembering Tate and Gabe, despite having spent like half his childhood in their house, but he has a clearer recollection of the stuff that's there. And also just a little bit about the way that he's kind of recovering his memory. Again, I think that's relatively realistic, because if you have some kind of brain damage, then you can sort of get some memory back if you regrow some connections, right? It's not like...
especially the similar stimuli, if you experience something that's vaguely familiar, or you meet someone, like in this case, Tino meeting Tate, and he's like, oh, actually... And the brain is just like buzzing, making the connections, and it's trying to sort of reconnect what there was, because it's somewhere there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think fits, right? Yeah. Because there's some stuff you lose entirely because you've actually like lost some brain mass and some cells have died, and you can't redraw the connections. But there's other stuff where you've just severed the connection between parts of the brain, and regrowing it works, right? Which it's because we'd kind of talked before about how like recovered memory, in the sense of like I don't know, going to someone who's like vaguely hypnotherapy and saying, you remember these things from your childhood. Like, that's not really a thing, but in this case, it is actually a thing. Because there's a physically plausible mechanism by which that makes sense.
Usually, though, if there's brain damage, I'm probably just talking out of my ass at the moment, but like, it's usually the short-term memory is affected, right? It's like, for example, concussion, but like if there's any deeper damage to any parts of the brain, obviously there will be some parts of it affected in a way that's unknown. But like in case of Tino, he had pretty much almost caved in skull, right? So...
I mean, I think it depends on the type of brain damage, and it's one of those things that's very, like, we don't know really how this works out.
Yeah, I mean...
but like, if you have something that damages something around your hippocampi, or that affects like your ability to grow new cells near there, then like new memory formation can be impaired.
Yes.
And so I think something related to short-term memory as well. And we still don't have any real grasp on how memory is like distributed through the brain, how that works, because it seems to be quite spread out. But like, but it's we don't have a good physical understanding of how that works, like how it maps to particular like locales. So
maybe one day in thousands of years.
I mean, hopefully sooner, because that'd be useful to know. But
but I don't know if it's too complex for us for the timing. Although saying that, like, we are sort of slowly making steps. For example, like by measuring the electrical impulses in the brain, I think people, like scientists, were able to sort of recreate the image that people were seeing. So we're sort of like getting there.
And, with exponentiation in technical capabilities and so on, the timelines start to look a bit more plausible, because stuff gets better faster than you would initially expect.
True, that's true. But we'll see. Maybe when quantum computers become more ready available, maybe we'll have enough processing power to actually be able to do some analysis on that. But
I mean, maybe. I don't know if it's something that you can readily... I mean, the sorts of problem you can solve easily, relatively speaking, with quantum computation are things where you can, like, as far as I understand it anyway, like describe the search space quite systematically. It's the same thing, like we're doing things like prime factorization, right? So you have a defined search space. It's just that it's very hard to do the search, right? It's easy to check it, but like hard to search stuff. So if you can frame the problem in those kind of terms, then quantum computation might help you. But it doesn't, like, it won't give you a panacea to all computational problems. It depends on the...
What do you mean? In all those science fiction books and movies, quantum is always the answer. So come on, Richard, come on.
But people are always waving their hands about quantum, and they don't pay attention to what it actually does. Anyhow. What's that one? Let me see now. Yes, the other thing I wanted to just talk a little bit about was the bonding that Akin is kind of missing out on with his sibling.
Yep.
And because it seems, and we'd kind of talked about it before as being like a sort of having implications for his like adult mating with his sibling, but it seems like there's something more to it than that. It like the loss of it seems like it's not just they may not be able to be like a normal Oankali reproductive unit, but it's more like he's lost something.
Because isn't it like the Oankali that basically the male and female are basically brother and sister?
Yeah.
So in this case, I think like usually it will happen, like for example with what's her name? Dichaan. Yes, that they were basic brother and sister. They must have had also the same experience, the same thing. So like initial the bonding, and then again the bonding during the adult mating. So I don't know. Maybe there's something in it that it's important for the most. But then again, like they can exchange all the emotions and feelings and thoughts which in speed of light. So like what's the problem? Like I don't get that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, it seems like there's some, it's one of those things where there's like a critical developmental phase in some sense where some ability to establish a certain kind of intimacy with the sibling that's independent in some way of the adult mating stuff that is somehow now inaccessible to a keen. I mean, it's a fairly alien concept, so I'm not sure how to.
Yeah, but also
think about
like
it,
for example, what about the Oankali? They were picking human equivalents, right? So like, but then again, it is human male, human female, right? But then in constructs, it doesn't work that way because they're basically part human, part Oankali, so they don't need that five sort of part family. They only need 3, right? Mm-hmm. Male, female, and Ooloi.
Yeah.
So in this case, like technically, you don't need to have that connection. Also, because from the human part, they would be able to create bonds or mate with anybody, right? They don't have. It doesn't have to be brother-sister relationship.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be in the Oankali setting either. I think it's just common. I think that it's kind of the norm, as it were. But I think that they can still it's perfectly fine for males and females who aren't brother and sister. Yeah. I think to mate in the Oankali, like reproductively speaking. But the in humans, I think it's just more of a like the humans don't have this way of functioning, right? They just they don't have that type of connection. They don't have that kind of communication apparatus. I mean, the same thing came up a little bit before when they're talking about the exchange with Nakanj, right? It's like the humans didn't have any kind of like sensory apparatus to understand the stuff that they might gather biologically that would be interesting to the Ooloi, right? They could, their microbiota and stuff they picked up and stuff they ate would be interesting to the Ooloi when they kind of touched them, but the humans don't have the sensory capability to notice all that stuff. So like they get the pleasure of interacting with the Ooloi, but they don't have like any real comprehension of the nature of the exchange which is going on. So I think it's kind of a similar thing, right? It's just the humans are not like sensorily equipped to experience whatever this thing is that the Oankali siblings experience.
I don't know. It just feels to me a bit strange because if you have the ability to exchange all your emotions, all your thoughts literally within very short period of time, you should be able to literally bond with anyone at any time. I don't know. It feels like there's might be more like of a genetical change in the for example, in the body of the male and female or the brother and sister that is necessary to for them to get ready for the mating. I don't know, but it just feels like
I was thinking about it more in terms of like developmental stage, right? In this, there's some sense in which they can establish a bond at a particular point in their maturation process. But if they're outside that window, so it's not really genetic, more in the kind of epigenetic space. And there's that concept in.
But then again, Ooloi could control that.
Right? With
like you could literally go, I can be like, Nikanj, go reset this. I want to experience that, and they literally reset that, and they experience the whole thing. Like
it's a good point. Yeah, it seems like they should be able to do that.
Like it just makes no sense for like to be such an important thing if you can literally control any aspect of your life. So I don't know, just for me it feels like a bit of a gap here between why it's so important, and maybe there's something in that does, I don't know, there's not fully explained in here.
It seems like there are some limits to what the granularity of control over their own development that they have.
Maybe.
Or some adverse consequences of resetting it and running it again.
Forever teenager, yeah.
Oh dear.
Oh boy. Can you imagine? Dear God. Forever in the rebellious stage. Oh boy. Yeah, I wouldn't want to experience that again. It's good not to care about social aspects of life. It's good that your brain doesn't. It's good that my brain doesn't compel me thinking about what other people think. You just don't care anymore.
It was never really the thing I found bothersome about. Anyway, but let's not go down that route.
No, it's just the reason why. Like, just for anybody that's interested, listening to because during the development, teenage time, like the puberty, our brains just basically are making us think about, the social position. More people, and some people is like you don't care. In some people, it's very important, but it's variable between people. But it's a really important factor for like development of the brain, and such is life. But I just cannot imagine just going through it again and again. Is it because you may not care about something, but your brain is just making you should really think about what people may think about it? It's like, no.
I'll let you that fits quite well with some of the themes of this book.
Yeah.
The whole biologically feeling compelled to think certain ways, and that being at odds with other things you want to think.
Absolutely. So in a way, I feel like Octavia Butler did her research well about it, and what the teenage, like the puberty truly is, and from the biological perspective, and how important the social status of a person is within this the closest community and stuff like that, and sort of does explain it for the Oankali as well.
Okay, then shall we talk about the broader arc of this
Sure.
part of the book, Phoenix?
So I wrote a little very short summary of the whole part, just to part 2 Phoenix, so for everyone to remind what was happening. So in the part 2 tells a story of Akin's kidnapping and the journey to the village of Phoenix. It starts with Tino being almost killed by a group of resistors who then take Akin on a journey. At first, Akin tried to escape them, but gets caught anyway because he's too small. And at some point in the journey, one of the men dies because of the ulcers. Another man gets to hate Akin because he responds to him as an adult would, not a kid. Eventually, the group gets to a village where Akin is pampered and breastfed by all the women, but eventually is taken away by the resistors because they are afraid that he might be taken away from them. Then they reach another abandoned village, and finally they get to Phoenix after some time, where Akin meets Tate and tells her truth about himself and that his mother is Lilith. At some point we get a gunfight where Tino's father, who's seeking revenge for his son on the resistors, and most of them die except for the actual man who is responsible for all of it. But we know he gets paralyzed. The part then continues with Akin's life in the village, meeting the pair of Oankali construct, Alma and Shkart, who are then taken to the salvage site and then eventually escape because of a potential psychopath who wants to mutilate the girls in order to remove their tentacles to make them look more human-like. And then the part ends with Akin spending a year between the salvages, trying to learn as much as he can about the humans, so that he can convey that to the Oankali, and then after a long period of time, his mother finally comes and gets him back.
Yeah. I think that more or less wraps it up.
It's pretty it's an interesting journey of Akin, and I wonder what's gonna happen next.
Yeah, because at the moment we have a pretty open set of possibilities,
Yep.
right? We've not really got a lot of groundwork laid for what could happen.
Yeah,
next.
absolutely.
It's pretty up in the air.
But the thing is, we can hypothesize things. But I guess we'll go to my predictions a bit later, because I did some I went through our notes and from our previous recordings, and sort of made a compilation of the topics we talked about throughout the whole part 2. And we talked about a lot of stuff. Like I have my list is not it's not as exhaustive, but just in general we talked about, like, I separate into 3 parts. Diseases, which sort of is part of one of the other parts, which are called biology of human and animals. But I just thought that this was more of a combination of this biology part of humans, and then also the third part of the topics, which was the history of humanity and science in general. And in the disease, we talked about the London cholera outbreak, and also as well as Huntington disease, how the function of hunting, how does it takes place, and what's the function and the processes involved in Huntington disease.
I'm trying to remember how these came up.
Yeah, I to be fair, when I was reading the notes, I was like, oh yeah, we talked about it because of this and this, but I don't remember it anymore. I will have to go back to the notes again to actually remember. The Huntington disease came up because Tate had it. And basically, the Oankali fixed that, and then that's the reason why we talked, because they could sense the repeats, and that you mentioned, like, oh, actually, you've actually quantified, didn't you, like the number of.
I did a quick check to find out how many repeats of that size there were.
The London cholera outbreak was because we talked about the water, I think I mentioned that there was a brewery that didn't get sick in London, whereas everybody else did. Yes. And you said because they had their own well, but also because of the alcohol. So that sort of was like the reasons behind, I think, why we talked about it. But what exactly happened at the time in the book, I don't remember, for the London cholera outbreak. Why exactly we talked about this? I think it was because of the alcohol that the men were drinking, I think.
Okay, yeah, that might have been it. Yeah,
as we talk, like, my brain is just like powering through. It's like, yeah, I think that was it. Well done, brain. Well done. Pat.
Yeah, that adds up.
Yeah. In terms of humanity and the history of humanity in science, we talked about a lot of stuff, like history of gun development. That was your, excessive knowledge about, like, flintlock and all the types of, development of the gun.
I read like one article once. It wasn't really. It's not. I'm not very deep on the firearms history.
And we also talked about Cold War and nuclear weapons. And actually, we talked about nuclear weapons quite a lot, a few times. And
they've come up a few times.
And then we talked about religion, specifically in this part. We talked about the paganism, Christianity, because we know that the coin Gabe had like a cross and also a phoenix. So that was that. Yeah,
and the sort of that's been related to, like, the function of narrative in human culture.
Yeah.
That was kind of a minor theme of this section, with the way that Akeem was coming to understand the way that humans use stories, what he initially was thinking of as lies.
Yes, exactly.
to convey information.
We talked about Titanic Sky in the movie that Neil deGrasse Tyson mentioned, like, oh, you could have get it correct, and I don't remember what exactly was other thing you mentioned that.
Well, it came up in the context of, like, I'm doing the same nitpicky nonsense that Neil was doing.
But what was it?
At some point we mentioned another thing you pulled out in here was Harris Hawks.
Yes.
But I think it may have originally come up after I was like, I watched the first episode of The Last Kingdom in one of our little content discussions, and I was like, there was a Harris Hawk on this guy's arm in the opening shot, and that's like 300-400 years off base for where it should have been.
Yes, because I put it in biology because I couldn't remember about this, and then yes, that makes sense. That was exactly what it was about. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah, but also the other kind of nitpicking that we do in general in this podcast about, like, the specific details of how this works. Right? Yeah. Although the part of the reason I don't have to do too much of that here in some sense is that Octavia walks that line very well, in that she includes enough vagueness to be plausible. And when she does kind of do something that's specific, she gets it right.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Well done. But then we also talked about Jupiter, and out of curiosity, I don't remember why, but I checked like the composition of the planet. As in like made of metallic hydrogen and stuff like that, and we just talked about the astrophysics and what was the context of this? I can't recall.
Was it something to do with where the Oankali were like doing something with the other parts of the solar system? I don't remember now.
I don't remember. I can't think of what was the reason. And finally, in this case, we actually talked about the woolly mammoth. About like it's more of a biology section, but also we talked about like the fact that just the development of science being able to recover or reintroduce the species that were long extinct again. So I thought that this is more part, like it fits more in this part.
I think that must have come up in the context of how the Oankali might have kind of brought back some of the animals of Earth after they may have gone extinct, kind of thing, maybe something like that. Yeah, and the fact that we're like there is a relatively well-funded project trying to do that with woolly mammoths.
That's correct. Yep. Yeah. And in terms of the biology, because actually we talked a lot about biology, surprisingly, in this chapter. So we talked about the body temperature in mammals.
Yes.
What was it? Because the Oankali temperature is lower.
The Oankali have a different temperature. Yeah.
And we talked about the processes of healing. Why we in particular process?
I think again because when the Oankali get injured and how they handle that, and also the guys trying to like disinfect wounds with alcohol.
Yes,
and stuff.
Why we talked about it was bad idea. Yeah. We talked a lot about the sex changes in animal kingdom and weird fertilization techniques. That Brazilian tree is always mentioned every few episodes.
The Brazil nut tree comes up a lot with the interweaved ecology, and then the various like fish and so on who swap sex at different points in their life and depending on environmental stimuli.
We talked about it. We talked about a lot of like the oxygen level, the big insects and the oxygen exchange, and that was because we talked about the whole idea of Amma and Skak being able to exchange oxygen between themselves if they go swimming. So, and we talked about, you mentioned about the protein levels in diet and genes, which was very interesting.
Yes, making a diet based on the frequency with which a given amino acid occurs in your
and the reason why was because Akin was always looking for more food because the diet the humans had was not rich enough.
They needed more protein.
Rich enough protein, And we just talked in diet about in diet in general.
I think the idea that like the protein intake is a sort of key determinant of satiety, right? The sense of being full.
We talked about a lot about the development of eyes, different types of like eyes and the evolution of eyes, which was really. We talked a lot about that because of the patches on Akin's body that were able to sense, see basically, as well as his normal eyes.
That's one thing that's a bit biologically less plausible, right? The degree to which the Oankali are able to see well with their skin.
Because simply from the evolutionary point.
I mean, well, from a physics perspective,
yes.
You need certain
concentration,
lensing capabilities and so on, and minimum amount of.
So we talked about that, and we talked about a lot about cephalopods. In any aspect of cephalopods, whether it was nervous system, their camouflage abilities, about the skin pigment layers, their limbs in general. We talked a lot about cephalopods, their behavior as well, and how some of them can be assholes for the scientists that work on them. Just a lot of fun stuff on cephalopods.
Actually, there's a good. I don't know if I plugged it at any point, but there's a follow-up piece of content that was released after we talked about cephalopods for the main part on the After On podcast with another cephalopod expert.
Okay.
Which is worth reading because he's a little bit more skeptical of some of the stuff that the cephalopods are reported to have done in labs and so on. But it's a fun interview.
But actually,
the book After On
Okay.
The author of which I am forgetting, who runs the After On podcast, and the After On podcast starts with discussions of stuff related to that book and then diverges into other topics.
I see.
That is a hilarious read about just like artificial intelligence and Silicon Valley culture and so on. And it's, that's just...
We'll find the author later,
it's genuinely
but
very funny.
I'll also check it out.
I want to say Rob Reed? Don't hold me to that one. I think something like that.
I'll put in the references, don't worry.
Check it. Yeah.
And we also talked about parabiosis and general alcohol metabolism, because these two are sort of connected. One of them was connected about the exchange of blood circulation for the oxygen. So there was earlier about the oxygen exchange. And also the alcohol metabolism was also connected because about the trying to get the girls drunk to cut her off the tentacles. So in a way, the topic sort of flowed in from one to another when they were trying to escape. So
I think that the parabiosis thing came up also in relation to like the oxygen and the ability to connect their possibly their circulatory systems together. That's the whole thing of like if you stitch an old mouse to a young mouse, the young mouse seems older and the old mouse seems younger.
And we talked about sleep and dreaming. I don't remember what was the purpose of this one.
I'm trying to remember when that came up. It might have been something in the context of memories. I think it also came up in our discussion of cephalopods, and they came up because of the eyes and the tentacles and the skin and all of that.
I think maybe also the nervous system that we were talking about. Like, I don't know, but I'm sure there was a connection between that. Of course, also my favorite frog species, the mini species, the mini genus.
Yes,
I love it. It's just brilliant.
Great name.
And finally, regeneration of limbs in amphibians. We talked a lot about the regeneration of, again, because it was the tentacles thing on the girls. It was also the same thing. We talked about the regeneration, the cytokine concentrations and the gradients and stuff like that. All of that was part of it.
I think that also comes up in the context of aging biology.
Yeah.
To link in the... and limb development and that kind of stuff. The whole conversation that I don't remember if it came up explicitly when we talked about that before, but when I was on the Bayesian Conspiracy podcast, like one of the things that I think about quite a bit when it comes to understanding what to do with regenerative medicine and aging, like this whole notion of kind of regressing the developmental stage, or like using the Yamanaka factors that we talked about before on the podcast to take the development back, like to use that metaphor of rolling the ball up the hill in the sort of epigenetic landscape for development, right? So the problem of what happens when you try to roll it back down again. You need to be able to control into which trenches the ball rolls, so you get the right kind of tissues in the adult species rather than something that's not working correctly or something that's cancerous. And that all kind of relates into that notion of how we control what developmental pathways we follow, right? So regeneration of limbs in amphibians is one of the things that, like, they are able to regrow a limb apparently from the correct point in their arm, right? If you cut wherever it is you cut the arm, like the bit that grows back is like the right length. It starts from the right spot. We don't really have the same thing in humans. Like, so like the degree to which we may or may not have the information present in our like latently present in our tissues to restore them if they're damaged is I think of great significance for understanding that kind of stuff in regenerative medicine.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I got off on a whole
no,
tangent.
it's fine. Obviously, it's just those topics are important for us in general, but we've talked a lot about amazing and interesting topics. And also, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that this part also had the longest chapter in all of the 3 books, right?
I believe so, yes.
So in general,
I think it may also be the longest section.
It might be also the longest section, but really good, really fun. In general, it's really interesting story on Akin's perspective as a young little fella, young boy, 1-year-old. But in general, just like it's fantastic how we managed to just weave in these topics just like that, right?
Yeah, so much of it comes from these kind of tiny little subtleties in the
Yeah.
text, right? And the story's kind of weaving around a few of these like relatively like minor complexities in this fairly straightforward overall arc of, right, Akin is kidnapped and he learns about the humans and he comes back to the Oankali. But there's a whole bunch of little small twists and turns in there and a bunch of interesting, intricate little details about his biology and his perceptions and his interactions with humans, which have been the starting off points, the nucleation points to catalyze our discussions on these many and varied subjects.
Yeah. It was really interesting. And when I was doing this summary, I was like, oh, this is pretty solid, like, list of topics that we talked about. And I feel like, interesting what's gonna pop up. The only problem is, because we talked about so much stuff here, I feel like in the future episodes when we have similar conversations, it's like, yeah, please check out other episodes. Yeah, please check it out.
Well, yeah, this is the problem. As with many things, it gets increasingly self-referential with time. We have to try and keep in mind...
We've already discussed certain things here.
Not get too dense with the self-reference, or it starts to become difficult to follow.
Yeah.
That was always my problem with Stephen Moffat's writing of Doctor Who.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think his writing in general, actually, it becomes increasingly self-referential over time, and if you're not paying attention to every detail, you can't keep.
I haven't read or watched any of Doctor Who. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of some things, but
I haven't done for years now. But,
I mean, like, it's from the movies and like the series, and like started as a radio series, right? Like, after the books were written, like it's sort of the first Doctor. And
I mean, I don't think it really did. I don't know if it had book source material. I don't remember. I think it was a TV thing from the get-go, but it was like way back in like the 60s or 50s or something. It was like super early. It was in black and white when it first came out.
But I thought it actually started as a radio broadcast first.
Oh, it may have been radio first. It may well have been radio first. But yeah, it was a ridiculously long time ago for an ongoing franchise.
It's just like, it's crazy. Like, there's some stuff like this that, just basically survive throughout the, all the different technical developments.
It spans a lot of different media, I suppose. But, I mean, the weird thing about British television is it's either like one and done, right? It's a short, contained series, or it never stops. Right? It runs forever. Right? This is like panel shows, like Have I Got News for You, and all these other things. It's either it gets like one series or it never dies. Whereas the Americans will just like renew stuff for 6, 7, 12, however many seasons Supernatural bloody got, but like all this 15, stuff that like runs for
I'm talking 15 seasons. Excuse me, Supernatural was.
Okay, yeah, but like there's some stuff where it's like you should have killed it way back here, but no, you dragged it on.
Yeah.
Whereas
to be fair,
it's an interesting balance.
To be fair, just to back on the Supernatural arc, because I was introduced to it when we were doing PhD. Do you remember, Richard? It was Shauna who introduced me. And she was like, you will really like it. I mean, I heard about it before, but she was like, yeah, it's about, fantasy and sort of this. I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I devoured 11 seasons in like span of a week or 2 weeks. Like, I just, like, every time I came back home from lab, I just watched that, and I just like, and at some point I was like, after 11 seasons, because they like, it felt like they were really spreading out. Just like I'm a bit tired, so I dropped it for like a solid year and a half too, and only recently finished it off. But just like,
okay, I never finished it. I think.
But the thing is,
and I carried on for. There was like the first major arc that was like the first like 5 or 6 seasons or something. I was like, okay, that resolved nicely, and then they kept going. I was like, why are they still going? Like they've not. Yeah,
that's the thing. And the last season felt like they really needed to finish this off, and they basically all those arcs that were related, they just sort of like almost chopped them. So it just felt like it had a good ending. In a way, but I just felt like, you could have either done it way back, few seasons ago, or at least try not to spread it so much and just focus on finishing off those arcs throughout the last 2 seasons instead of one last season and a few episodes.
Yeah. That's it. It's an interesting difference in the way that the Americans and the British commission TV shows. I'm not quite sure what the origins of that are. I talked to some like insider producer people in the industry to find out why that's so different. But it is a difference.
I'll tell you something that really blew my mind. Okay, so as a kid in Poland, right, we were also introduced to Mr. Bean, right? Like I thought, and many people as well, like when we saw it on TV sometimes in like on Saturday morning, that's where, you know, like the cartoons were and all the like family sort of TV series or shows were, and Mr. Bean would like appear for like 10 minutes or something, and you know, like, oh, it was great. I loved Mr. Bean, but it always felt there's like a lot of episodes, right, of it. But realistically, there was only 6 episodes ever recorded. I think it was 6.
I can't. I think I must have seen them all because I do remember seeing the live action.
Like
Mr.
the
Bean
thing
stuff.
is, like the original Mr. Bean, like there's I think only 6 or 8 episodes ever being recorded, but it was cut in. It was done in such a way that you could cut it into like 5-10 minute chunks. And basically make more episode of it. So it always felt like there's a lot of like things I haven't seen, but realistically, I've probably seen them all. It's just that it was just the way it was presented.
So there were
it was just
like individual self-contained arcs in those little sections.
Exactly. I was just like, oh wow, this is true. I checked it, and it is true that there's only a few episodes of Mr. Bean, in fact, but it's in the way done that just basically was spread out. That, you know, it felt like there was like seasons of it.
And they came back years later and did some more movies and so on. But,
yeah.
And we've strayed violently off topic again.
I guess it's, you know, it's excusable and acceptable for the last chapter of the part 2. So
let's reel it back in for a second to talk about your predictions for part 3.
There we go.
Which I'm gonna practice saying that one.
I'm just gonna copy one, paste you saying it, one that you're happy with, and just copy paste it every time when we do it. It's gonna be really funny. And now for the episode, we will talk.
Just like a really bad obvious cut where it's just insert.
Yes, very very obvious. So yes, for my prediction, I'm not gonna fall for this trap, okay, Octavia? I know you, game. I know it by now. And I'm sure there's gonna be some time passing now. And I'm sure it's gonna be more than like few years, because I feel like in the part 2, like in the book 2, when you were like, oh, suddenly it's like 7 years after the whole book 1. I'm sure it's gonna be again like this when Akin's either a teenager or something. And obviously the part 3 is called after the ship's name, so I'm sure it's going to be taking place on the ship, and maybe like either like learning about the Oankali more, or trying like not learning about Oankali, but trying to tell Oankali about the humans and the whole idea of having the human Akjai.
Okay, interesting. So Akin has to be an advocate, an activist on behalf of the humans, to try and persuade the Oankali powers that be that they deserve an Akjai. Interesting.
I just thought that at this point, like, there's gonna be again a time skip, because it's nicely wrapped up.
Okay. Any guesses on the duration of the time skip?
Oh, I don't know. Like, Richard. It's already, my brain power has been used out coming up with that. Like, I don't know if I can like guess, but I'm sure it's going to be more of like enough Akin being old enough to sort of being taken seriously, you know, not being the kid, but like enough to be already, you know, like the true Messiah he's supposed to be, like in prime age of like 10. No, I'm joking. He's probably a teenager times.
He can be the Lisan Algai for the
trying
for
so
the
I'm just trying to like probably, let's say, like when he's a teenager, to try to sort of be able to finally convey what he needs to convey for the humans. I mean, I don't think it's not gonna happen. You know, the whole idea of him trying to make the Oankali, you know, like persuade the Oankali to do what, you know, for the humans, what, you know, humans want. He was too young for the time, like just like trade as a 3-year-old to do this. And I am sure that, like, because the Oankali also have this thing where like humans, they don't listen to their kids, so he needs to be old enough to be actually enough, so his word projects enough,
old enough to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the any ideas about what might be going on with the humans in that time, or what like if Keen gets his way on the human Acti, what the Oankali might think that should look like?
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I feel like, I mean, it feels like if it's gonna be a serious time skip, there's going to be a serious development in the human resistance, like, you know, more guns, more like something's like serious happening in the meantime. Because I mean, there's breadcrumbs that we were left with that they lead to it. There's no other answer to it. But I don't know whether it's going to be between the Oankali and the humans, or the humans and humans. You know what I mean? The humans living the trade villages. But in terms of the... sorry, what was your second question?
What might a human Acti look like?
For the Oankali, in the Oankali perspective. You know what? I feel like it depends. If the Oankali do what they're supposed to do, and in a way like help let the humans be like on an island, do whatever they want to do, then it's going to be more of like what the just continuation of what the Phoenix is, but just, you know, being able to have kids. But I feel like there might be like some sort of supervision, that every so often the Oankali arrive and they're just like, okay, we touch you and you can have children, right? Sort of this type of thing, like that they still control the population to prevent any...
So it still feels a bit present campy.
Yes, to prevent any sort of like overdevelopment, like, you know, let's make enough population so that they can fight off the Oankali, or lol, as if you would be able to, but hey, something along those lines.
Okay, interesting.
It's either or.
Right, then I should probably stop asking questions.
Because it maybe you'll guide me to... But yeah, I guess that's it for today, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. We can.
So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We are Xenothesis. You can find all the places we upload our podcast on xenothesis.com. As Richard mentioned earlier, please like and subscribe, comment, you know, spread the podcast everywhere. I mean, the more people hear about this, the more motivations we have to do this podcast. But yeah, I was Michael Glinko.
I was Richard Acton.
Bye-bye.